Okay, hello, good evening, and welcome back to another session of practice for logical reasoning. My name is Govind Singh, your faculty for English, LR, and GK. How many of you are here today? Okay, we'll just wait for 30 seconds for more people to join us. We'll be practicing a few logical reasoning questions today. Not a lot, just 5, 6 questions. And on different types of questions. We'd be doing assumptions, we'd also be doing conclusions, we would also be doing inferences. And as most of you keep on requesting, we would also be doing logical flaw based questions today. So that is the action plan, that is the agenda. Are you guys ready to start? Can I get a ready in the chat box if you all are ready to start today's session? A quick ready in the chat box, please. Ready in the chat box very quickly. Is everyone ready? So let's start today's class. Start the practice questions. So this is the passage on your screen, and the question on your screen, you have 4 options and you have to tell me the right answer. As always, you guys have 1 minute to do this particular question, and then we'll look at the solution. Please start. Please tell me the answer in the chat box as soon as you are done with the question. You have 1 minute to solve this. It's a very non-lengthy, short question. Please read the question and the options very carefully. The options can be confusing. Also, in this particular question, you have to pay attention to the facts given in the passage. Pay extra attention to the facts in the passage. Is everyone done? Everyone done with the question? Last 15 seconds. Okay, let's look at it. A newly discovered painting on the wooden panel by Michelangelo, he was a famous painter, must have been completed after 1507, but before 1509. This is important information. After 1507, but before 1509. So when you say before 1509, that means before 1509 started, the painting should have been completed. So ideally in the year 1508. And they're saying it must have been completed after 1507. That means 1507 has ended, which again means that the painting was started in 1508 and ended in 1508. Okay. It cannot have been painted earlier than 1507 because one of its central figures carries a coin that was not minted until that year. Okay. So we have the reason of why not before 1507. It cannot have been painted after 1509 because it contains a pigment that Michelangelo is known to have abandoned when a cheaper alternative became available in that year. So he left using that particular pigment in this year. So that means the painting was painted before 1509 and after 1507. Okay. Now, what do you have to do in this question? You have to tell which of the following is an assumption on which the argument depends. So we have identified the argument. The primary argument is that he completed the painting between this particular time duration. And why? Because of these 2 reasons. That one was minting of the coin, and the second was abandonment of the particular pigment. Okay, so this is our argument. Let's look at the options. Option A says no stocks of the abandoned pigment existed after 1509. Now, why is this not the right option? Why is this not the right assumption? You might think that, okay, this seems like a fair assumption, and the argument can depend on this because the argument says that it should be before 1509 and after 1509 the pigment was not used. But see, this is where things get tricky. Michelangelo is known to have abandoned when a cheaper alternative became available. So, if it existed or did not exist, that has no bearing, no consequence on our argument. We do not care if it existed or did not exist. If Michelangelo has already abandoned it, abandoned means left it. So he does not care if it exists or does not exist, right? So this is a wrong option. Let's look at the next option, option B. Michelangelo did not work on the painting over the course of several years. Yes, this is a very valid assumption that it cannot be over a course of several years because he started it after 1507 and completed it before 1509. So several years means multiple years, but this spans only during 1508. So that means it was completed either in few months or in few weeks. That is a very valid assumption which we have to take for the argument to hold true. Because if we say that it was painted over the course of several years, you cannot say that 1507 से पहले जा सकते थे आप timeline में, 1509 के बाद जा सकते थे timeline में. It has to be between that timeline, and that cannot be several years. So B seems the most valid assumption as of now. Let's look at C and D as well. C says the coin depicted in the painting was known to general public in 1507. Now this is just a fact which is very irrelevant to our argument. What do we do if it was known to general public? This is unrelated, right? Option D says the wooden panel on which the painting was executed cannot be tested accurately for age. Again, a fact which is unrelated to the argument. So wrong option. B becomes the best option and the correct assumption, right? Is this question clear to everyone? Can I get a yes or no in the chat box? Is this question clear to everyone? Quickly, yes or no in the chat box. Clear? Simple? You just had to be attentive of the facts. Okay, let's move to the next question, question number 2. You guys have 1 minute to solve it. Let's go for it. Question number 2. Read the question very carefully. The options are a little tricky here. Last 20 seconds to solve it. Okay, let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's look at the question. A detailed lab analysis of a meteorite recently discovered in Antarctica revealed that the meteorite has geological characteristics common to the planet Mars. To date, scientists have not found these characteristics anywhere other than on Mars. Using a technique called acid etching, scientists found out that the meteorite contained fossilized remains of single cell life forms. This is the passage. Now, what do we have to do? The statement above, if true, best supports which of the following as a conclusion. So you have to tell that this particular statement can serve as a conclusion for what? So this is your conclusion. Tell which of the arguments can the conclusion this can be the conclusion for, right? A says the fossilized remains indicate that life exists on Mars. This is Mars. Can we say this? Can we support this particular statement with this conclusion? See, let's look at the passage. It says that scientists found that meteorite contains fossilized remains of single cell life forms. Can single cell life forms be equated to life? Maybe, maybe not. We cannot say for sure. Just because single cell life forms are detected, life exists on Mars is, I would say, an overstatement. This is stretching it a lot. ठीक single cell life forms and life में बहुत difference होता है. So this is an option which is not very strong, I would say. Scientists have evidence to support a hypothesis that the meteorite came from Mars. Yes, absolutely. This can serve as a conclusion for this. जिनके पास evidence है to support a hypothesis that meteorite came from Mars. What is the hypothesis? That they discovered it in Antarctica and it had geological characteristics common to the planet Mars. And to date, अभी तक ऐसे characteristics Mars के अलावा कहीं से नहीं मिले. And acid testing से ये तो चलो irrelevant है. But this can be a conclusion for this option that it has a hypothesis which is being supported by the evidence that the meteorite came from Mars. Let's look at the other two options as well. The meteorite represents a substantial step forward in human knowledge of the development of life in solar system. Now, this is not a premise or an argument for which this can be a conclusion. This looks like a conclusion in itself. Okay? तो हमें conclusion नहीं बताना है. हमें बताना है which of the statement above, if true, best support which of the following as a conclusion. Okay? So this becomes the wrong answer. Undiscovered meteorites currently exist in Antarctica. This is out of scope and vague option. So incorrect. Option B becomes the correct answer. Okay? Chalo. I hope this question is clear. Can I get a yes or no if this question is clear in the chat box? Very quickly. Let's move on to the third question. You guys have 1 minute to solve it. Question number 3. Let's do question number 3 very quickly. Are we done, guys? Last 15 seconds. Last 15 seconds to solve question number 3. Okay, let's look at it. Wild cheetahs live in the African grasslands. Okay. Previous estimates of the size that the wild cheetah population must be in order for these animals to survive a natural disaster in the African grasslands region were too small. And the current population barely meets the previous estimates. At present, however, there is not enough African grassland to support a wild cheetah population larger than the current population. So we are talking about two things. One is survival of the cheetahs, for which they need a larger population, and currently enough African grassland is not available to support a bigger cheetah population. Right? Now, the statement above, if true, most strongly supports which one of the following conclusions. So these are conclusions 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to tell which of the following conclusions is supported by this particular statement, the statements. So let's look at the options. Previous estimates of the size of the existing wild cheetah population were inaccurate. Can we support this conclusion saying previous estimates of the size of existing wild cheetah population were inaccurate? How would this support as a conclusion? This is more like a flaw in the reasoning, more like a additional fact. This is not a conclusion, right? So it doesn't seem to be the right answer. B says the cheetah's natural habitat is decreasing in size at a faster rate than is the size of wild cheetah population. Okay, but this is already given to us in the passage. How is this a conclusion? This is again a fact which is already mentioned in the passage that their habitat is not sufficient enough to sustain the larger cheetah population. अभी उनकी population जो है वो decrease increase हो रही है. This we cannot conclude. We cannot say that how what is the rate of decreasing of the natural habitat. Is it decreasing than the faster rate than the size of wild cheetah population, or at a slower rate, or at par rate? We do not have enough information to conclude that किस speed से the habitat is decreasing as compared to the size of the wild cheetah population. We know that अभी जो है सिर्फ wild cheetah population को sustain करने के लिए जितना land है उसके अलावा हमारे पास land नहीं है. The population grows. So is it decreasing in size, or the probably the land is staying the same in size and the population is increasing? That could also be the case. So we cannot say this for sure. We cannot support this as a conclusion very strongly. Option C says the principal threat to endangered wild cheetah population is neither pollution nor hunting but a natural disaster. Okay. This is again not a conclusion but just an additional fact. This is already mentioned in the passage that it would be tough for them to survive a natural disaster because the regions are too small. But is this the principal threat? How do we know that pollution is the principal threat or hunting is the principal threat and not a natural disaster, or a natural disaster is the principal threat? We do not have enough information to conclude that. So it doesn't seem to be the right option. D says in the short term, the wild cheetah population will be incapable of surviving a natural disaster in an African grassland. So what does that tell you? That tells you that they cannot survive a natural disaster in the African grassland as of now in the short term, which is in sync with the facts given to you that at present there is not enough grassland to support a wild cheetah population larger than the current population. So अगर अभी natural disaster आया, they would obviously not be able to survive it. So this becomes the right conclusion. Option D. Okay. I hope this is clear to everyone. Why A, B, C are incorrect and why D is correct? Because it talks just about the short term. We are also talking about at present. And right now they are incapable of surviving a natural disaster. Why? Because for surviving a natural disaster, they need a larger population. And larger population cannot be sustained because the grasslands are not enough. So you understand the causation and the link between the two? D becomes the right answer. Okay, let's move to the next question. Question number 4. You guys have 1 minute to solve this. Let's do it very quickly. This is a tricky question. Read the question carefully and the option carefully. Last 20 seconds to solve this. Okay, time's up. Let's go for it. Let's look at the question. The question is saying which one of the following statements follows logically from the statements above. So, logically coherent statement we have to tell. Politicians said the current crisis in mathematics education must be overcome if we are to remain competitive in the global economy. Alleviating this crisis requires the employment of successful teaching methods. Okay. No method of teaching a subject can succeed that does not get students to spend a significant amount of time outside of class studying that subject. So, for a teaching method to succeed, students should be spending some time outside of class studying that subject. Okay. Ciao. Let's look at the question. Which one of the following statements follows logically from the statements above? Let's see the options. If students spend a significant amount of time outside of class studying mathematics, the current crisis in mathematics education will be overcome. Hmm. Very tempting option, right? Seems like a very logically flowing argument from the passage. Let's look at the other options. The current crisis in mathematics education will not be overcome unless students spend a significant amount of time outside of class studying mathematics. Now, this is just a negative of this. But is this the right option or is this the right option? Which one of them would be more logically coherent? We'll come back to this. Let's look at option C and D. Few subjects are as important as mathematics to the effort to remain competitive in the global economy. Now, this is unrelated and vague, definitely not the right option. Only if we succeed in remaining competitive in the global economy will students spend a significant amount of time outside of class studying mathematics. This again brings you to the first statement. It is not logically flowing, it is returning back to the first statement. So, this is not making a logical flow. This is just reiterating in a reverse manner. So, this definitely would not be a right option. Now, it comes down to A and B. ए इज सेइंग कि सिग्निफिकेंट टाइम अगर बच्चे मैथ्स पे स्पेंड कर रहे हैं तो मैथ एजुकेशन वाली प्रॉब्लम ओवरकम हो जाएगी और बी कह रहा है अगर सिग्निफिकेंट टाइम स्पेंड नहीं करते तो मैथ्स एजुकेशन प्रॉब्लम ओवरकम नहीं होगी लेट्स कीप दिस क्वेश्चन ऑन होल्ड फॉर अ व्हाइल लेट्स लुक एट एन एग्जांपल मैं अगर कहता हूं कि अगर आप मैथ्स या क्वांट नहीं पढ़ोगे क्लैट के लिए तो आपका क्लैट नहीं निकलेगा इफ यू डोंट स्टडी क्वांट फॉर क्लैट you won't be able to crack CLAT. Now, what is more logically coherent? Me saying that you can crack CLAT if you do quant, or you cannot crack CLAT if you do not do quant. क्या मैं गारंटी कर सकता हूं कि आप CLAT क्रैक कर जाओगे अगर आप क्वांट कर लोगे? नहीं. There are other variables involved. There is LR, there is English, there is GK. Quant is just one prerequisite. But I can say for sure कि अगर quant नहीं किया तो CLAT definitely नहीं होगा. Understood? Do you guys understand the logic? Applying the same logic, कि unless they spend significant amount of time outside of class studying mathematics, the crisis will not be overcome. But crisis में और भी तो parameters हो सकते हैं ना. अगर मैं बोल दूं कि सिर्फ मैथ्स पढ़ने से आउटसाइड ऑफ क्लासरूम क्राइसिस ओवरकम हो जाएगा, I might be possibly ignoring other parameters, other factors which are required to overcome this mathematics education problem. So I cannot say this for sure logically and coherently, and B becomes the right option. Because अगर ये नहीं होगा तो फिर बात नहीं बनेगी. अगर ये होगा तो बात बन भी सकती है, नहीं भी बन सकती, we do not know. Maybe not. But B is very essential. You guys understand why not A and why B? Why we choose B? And C and D तो चलो गलत है. Is this clear, guys? Interesting question this was. Okay, let's move to question number 5. You again have 1 minute to solve it. Let's do it. Question number 5. So you have to tell the error in the reasoning, the flaw in the reasoning. Last 30 seconds. Okay, time's up. Let's do it. Let's go for it. Physicalists expect that ultimately all mental functions will be explainable in neurobiological terms. That is, everything we do with our brain can be explained in neurobiological terms. Achieving this goal requires knowledge of neurons and their basic functions, a knowledge of how neurons interact, and a delineation of psychological faculties to be explained. So, three criteria: knowledge of neurons and their basic function, knowledge of how they interact, and the delineation of psychological faculties. At present, there is substantial amount of fundamental knowledge about the basic functions of neurons. So one criteria is settled. And the scope and character of such psychological capacities as visual perception and memory are well understood. So two criteria are settled. Thus, as physicalists claim, mental functions are bound to receive explanations in neurobiological terms in near future. सिर्फ passage पढ़ के ही I can identify the flaw that the third parameter is not fulfilled. That is a knowledge of how neurons interact. If you read the passage carefully, you need knowledge of neurons and basic functions, knowledge of how they interact, and delineation of psychological faculties. But आपको दो ही चीजें available. So there is a simple flaw in the reasoning कि कैसे हम near future में explain करेंगे उसको when we don't have the third criteria yet. Fifth, this question is saying which one of the following indicates an error in the reasoning. A says the passage fails to describe exactly what is currently known about basic functions. That is not required. We do not need that information, that what is known about the basic functions. We just have a criteria that we need to know the basic function, and that is enough for us. So that is not an error in the reasoning. The word neurobiological is used as though it had the same meaning as the word mental. This is a tricky option. ये आपको कंफ्यूज करने के लिए कि न्यूरोबायोलॉजिकल को मेंटल से रिप्लेस कर दिया गया. मेंटल फंक्शंस अलग होता है, न्यूरोबायोलॉजिकल अलग होता है. देखो, if you are explaining mental functions in neurobiological terms, that means they have a similarity, they have a link, and the same mental functions term is used in the last line as well, which helps us confirm and consolidate कि सेम चीज की ही बात हो रही है, चाहे वो न्यूरोबायोलॉजिकल टर्म्स हो चाहे वो मेंटल फंक्शंस हो, सेम बात हो रही है. So the difference in the usage of word is not an error which we are looking at. C says the argument does not indicate whether it would be useful to explain mental functions in neurobiological terms. Why do we need an explanation of how and why it would be useful? That is irrelevant to our argument. D says the passage does not indicate that any knowledge has been achieved about neurons, how neurons interact. Yes, absolutely. This is a basic error, the very major, very striking error in the reasoning. That आपको तीन चीजें चाहिए and ये वाली चीज है ही नहीं आपके पास. No knowledge about how neurons interact, right? So this becomes a error in the reasoning, a flaw in the reasoning, and D becomes the correct option. I hope this is clear to everyone. Is the question clear, guys? Yes. Perfect. Let's do one more passage for the day. Let's do one more question. Question number 6. You again have 1 minute to solve it. Let's do it very quickly. Last 30 seconds, guys. Okay, last 10 seconds to solve this before we discuss it. Okay, time's up, time's up, time's up, time's up, time's up. Let's look at it. The prevalence of a simian virus has been directly correlated with the population density in gorillas. Okay. Recent fieldwork in the Republic of Dunaga, based on capturing gorillas and testing the gorillas for the virus, has shown that Morgania plain gorillas are more than twice as likely to be infected than the Kogula mountain gorillas. Nevertheless, the population density of Koluga gorillas is significantly greater than that of Morgania gorillas. So there is a paradox, there is a flaw in the reasoning कि ऐसा उल्टा कैसे हो रहा है कि जब इसको ज्यादा इफेक्ट कर रहे हैं Morgania plains को तो फिर कोलुगा गोरिल्लास आर सिग्निफिकेंटली ग्रेटर देन मॉर्गेनिया गोरिल्लास कैसे हो सकता है राइट ओके लेट्स लुक एट व्हाट कुड बी द which of the following would best account for the discrepancy logical flaw noted above. During periods of little rainfall, Kaluga gorillas often wander down into the plains in search of food. Now, this is going beyond the premise. Our our argument is more related about the population density and the effect of the virus on the gorillas. This is going a little bit off track. That in rainfall they come into the plains, so it does not seem to be the right reason for the logical flaw. B says dormant strains of the simian virus are often difficult to detect. Now, this again is going beyond the premise because we are not talking about active strains or dormant strains. We are saying that when tested, it has shown that Morganian plain gorillas are more than twice as likely to be infected. ठीक है तो उनका susceptibility ज़्यादा है Morgania plain वालों की. But population density of Koluga gorillas is significantly greater. तो क्या ये इसमें कोई logical flaw है? है. क्या ये उसको resolve कर रहा है that dormant strains of simian virus are often difficult to detect? In whom? In the Morgania ones, in the Koluga ones? Which one? We do not know. It's not talking about a specific species. तो हम flaw को कैसे resolve करें? So this also becomes a wrong answer. Insufficient to resolve the flaw. C says due to the Morgania gorilla's natural habitat and its less reclusive nature, researchers have tested a greater number of Koluga gorillas than Morgania gorillas. And क्योंकि greater testing हुई है, तो उस वजह से ये flaw आया है. That can be one reason. But again, ये तो एक तरीके से जो flaw है उसको support कर रहा है ना. This is supporting the flaw that due to the Morgania gorilla's natural habitat and its less reclusive nature, यानी कि it is more prevalently found, less reclusive. Researchers have tested greater number of Koluga gorillas than Morgania. So again, this is not exactly solving our logical flaw. Does not seem to be the right option. Let's look at D. Infected Koluga gorillas behave very aggressively and are more difficult to subdue for testing. Yes, this definitely solves this flaw. क्योंकि ये लोग क्या कह रहे हैं? This test is based on what? This is based on capturing gorillas and testing the gorillas for the virus. So अगर infected Koluga gorillas behave aggressively and they are not available for testing, तो फिर तो obviously ये दिखेगा कि Morgania plain gorillas are more than twice as likely क्योंकि आप Kogula वालों को enough test ही नहीं कर रहे. They are aggressive. They are difficult to catch for testing. So you keep on testing more Morgania plain gorillas, and then you say that they are more than twice as likely to be infected when you are not testing them in similar proportions. Okay, so this is the logical flaw, and this option is clearly addressing that logical flaw. ठीक है, क्योंकि टेस्टिंग नहीं हो पा रही उनकी, इसलिए ये लॉजिकल फ्लॉ है. And this becomes our right answer. Option number D. Okay. I hope this is also clear. If you have any doubts in any of the 6 questions, you can ask them in the comment section after the stream ends. I'll be answering them. Okay. And I hope this was a productive class. I hope you enjoyed the class. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section. And yeah, that's all for today. I hope we had a good practice session. Keep learning, keep preparing. I'll see you now in the second part of the August current affairs. That is tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. So see you all there. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Keep learning, keep preparing. Signing off.